Somewhere in the world, right now, someone is performing an action exactly the way their ancestors performed it 1,000 years ago. Not approximately, not roughly, exactly. The same movements, the same materials, the same words, in some cases, passed down through a chain of memory so long that the people at either end of it would be completely unable to communicate with each other if they somehow met, and yet they are connected, across that impossible distance of time, by a single unbroken thread of practice. These are the world's oldest living traditions, not museum pieces, not historical reenactments, living practices, still performed today, by people who learned them the same way their ancestors did, by watching, by doing, by being taught directly by someone who was taught directly by someone else, in a chain stretching back further than written history in many cases. Today, we are going to take you inside some of the most extraordinary living traditions still practiced on Earth. Let's begin in Japan, with a craft tradition so precise, so demanding, and so deeply rooted in centuries of accumulated knowledge that it has been recognized as a national treasure. Traditional Japanese sword forging. The art of forging a traditional Japanese blade has been practiced using essentially the same core techniques for over 1,000 years. The process begins with a specific type of steel, traditionally smelted in a clay furnace over several days, using a method that produces steel of varying carbon content within a single batch, steel that the smith must then sort by hand, judging quality through sound, color, and texture developed through years of apprenticeship. The steel is then folded and hammered repeatedly, sometimes more than a dozen times, creating thousands of microscopic layers that give the finished blade its strength and its characteristic grain pattern, visible to a trained eye as a subtle texture along the metal surface. The most distinctive technique in this tradition is differential hardening, coating the blade in a specific clay mixture, applied more thickly along the spine and more thinly along the edge, before plunging the red-hot steel into water. This creates a blade with a harder, sharper edge and a softer, more flexible spine, a combination that gives traditional Japanese blades their characteristic curve, which forms naturally during this hardening process rather than being shaped afterward. A master swordsmith today trains for years, often a full decade or more, before being considered qualified to produce blades independently, learning not from textbooks but through direct apprenticeship, watching and absorbing knowledge that has never been fully written down in a way that could replace the physical experience of learning at a master's side. From Japan, let's travel to Mongolia, to a tradition of hunting that connects modern practitioners to a way of life that predates recorded history. Eagle hunting with golden eagles. In the remote mountains of western Mongolia, a small number of hunters continue to practice a tradition that anthropologists believe stretches back over 6,000 years, training golden eagles to hunt in partnership with humans across the open steppe and mountain terrain. The relationship between hunter and eagle is built over years. Eaglets are typically taken from the nest at a young age and raised by the hunter, who feeds the bird by hand, speaks to it constantly, and gradually builds the trust necessary for the eagle to return to the hunter's arm after each flight rather than simply flying away once released. The training process is extraordinarily patient and precise. The eagle must learn to recognize the hunter's voice and call, to associate the hunter with safety and food, and eventually to work cooperatively during the hunt itself, flying ahead, spotting prey across vast distances, with eyesight many times more acute than human vision, and returning to deliver the catch rather than consuming it independently. The partnership typically lasts for several years, before the eagle is released back into the wild, a practice maintained specifically to ensure the eagle population remains healthy, and the tradition remains sustainable across generations. The relationship between hunter and bird, built through years of patient daily interaction, is one of the most extraordinary examples of cooperation between humans and wild animals found anywhere in the world. Now let's travel to Peru, to a craft tradition that produces objects of such extraordinary complexity that they continue to puzzle textile experts who study them. Traditional Andean weaving. In communities scattered across the high Andes of Peru, weavers continue to produce textiles using techniques and patterns that have been passed down for thousands of years, predating even the Inca civilization. The process begins with the raising of alpacas and llamas, whose wool is sheared, cleaned, and spun by hand using a simple wooden spindle, a tool so basic in appearance that its capacity to produce thread of remarkable consistency and fineness surprises most people seeing the process for the first time. The wool is then dyed using natural materials gathered from the surrounding landscape, certain insects, plants, minerals, and roots, each producing specific colors through processes of preparation that are themselves traditional knowledge passed down through generations of women and weaving families. The weaving itself is performed on a backstrap loom, a deceptively simple device consisting of little more than sticks and string, with one end attached to a fixed point, and the other end attached to a strap around the weaver's waist, allowing the weaver to control tension through subtle movements of their own body. Using this method, weavers produce textiles featuring extraordinarily complex geometric patterns, some containing symbolic meanings specific to the weaver's community, family lineage, or region, patterns so intricate that some researchers studying them have noted similarities to complex mathematical structures, encoded entirely in the memory of women who learned the techniques from their mothers and grandmothers, without any written pattern or guide. From the mountains of Peru, let's travel to West Africa, to a tradition of oral storytelling and historical preservation that has functioned, for centuries, as a living library for entire societies. The griot tradition, across several West African nations, including Mali, Senegal, and Guinea, certain families belong to a hereditary class of musicians, storytellers, and oral historians known as griots. For centuries, in societies where written records were not the primary method of preserving history, griots served as the keepers of historical memory, memorizing and performing epic histories, genealogies, and significant events, often accompanied by traditional stringed instruments, passing this knowledge from generation to generation entirely through oral transmission and memorization. The training of a griot traditionally begins in childhood, within families where the role itself is hereditary, passed from parent to child across many generations. A young griot learns not just specific stories, but an entire repertoire of historical knowledge, musical technique, and the performative skills necessary to hold an audience's attention across performances that can last for hours. Some griot families maintain oral genealogical records and historical accounts stretching back hundreds of years, preserved entirely through memory and performance, representing a form of historical preservation fundamentally different from written record keeping, yet remarkably reliable across generations due to the rigor of the training and the social importance placed on accuracy within these communities. Let's travel now to Bali, Indonesia, to an artistic tradition so intricate that a single completed work can represent literally thousands of hours of accumulated effort across an entire community. Balinese temple offerings and ceremonial art. In Bali, the creation of elaborate ceremonial offerings, intricate arrangements of flowers, palm leaves, fruit, and other natural materials, often constructed into towering, architecturally complex forms, represents a living tradition that combines artistic skill, religious devotion, and community cooperation in a way that few other traditions manage to balance so completely. The techniques for folding and weaving palm leaves into the precise geometric and decorative shapes required for these offerings are taught from a young age, typically by older female relatives, in a process of learning that is woven directly into daily community life, rather than treated as a separate or specialized skill. The complexity of the most elaborate offerings, constructed for significant community ceremonies, can be genuinely staggering, towering structures sometimes reaching several feet in height, composed of hundreds of individually prepared elements, each one folded or arranged according to specific traditional patterns that carry symbolic meaning. What makes this tradition particularly remarkable is its impermanence. These elaborate creations, representing enormous investments of time and skill, are typically used once, in a single ceremony, and then allowed to decompose naturally, embodying a cultural philosophy that values the process and the intention behind the creation as much as, or more than, the preservation of the finished object itself. And finally, let's travel to the Arctic regions of North America and Greenland, to a tradition of craftsmanship and survival knowledge that has allowed human communities to thrive in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Traditional Inuit skin sewing and clothing construction. For thousands of years, Inuit communities across the Arctic have developed and refined techniques for processing animal skins and constructing clothing capable of providing protection in temperatures and conditions that would be lethal without proper preparation. The knowledge required encompasses an extraordinarily detailed understanding of different animal skins, caribou, seal, and others, each possessing different properties suited to different parts of a garment or different specific uses. Knowledge built through generations of careful observation and practical experimentation refined into precise, reliable technique. The sewing itself, traditionally performed using needles crafted from bone or ivory and thread made from sinew, requires techniques specifically developed to create completely waterproof seams, an achievement of genuine technical sophistication, since a single failed seam in extreme cold can represent a serious survival risk rather than merely an inconvenience. This knowledge has traditionally been passed down primarily through women, who learn the techniques over years of guided practice, developing not just manual skill but a deep practical understanding of materials and construction, that allowed Arctic peoples to survive and thrive in one of the most challenging environments human beings have ever successfully inhabited. These traditions, Japanese sword forging, Mongolian eagle hunting, Andean weaving, the West African griot tradition, Balinese ceremonial art, and Inuit skin sewing, represent just a small sample of the extraordinary living knowledge that continues to be practiced, taught, and passed down across the world today. Each one represents not just a skill, but an entire system of knowledge, refined and perfected across countless generations, carried forward by people who learned directly from those who came before them, in an unbroken chain stretching back further than most of recorded history. In a world that often moves toward standardization, toward mass production, toward methods that prioritize speed and uniformity above all else, these traditions represent something genuinely different. They are reminders that some forms of knowledge cannot be written down completely, cannot be fully captured in a manual or a video. They must be learned the way they have always been learned, through patience, through years of guided practice, through direct transmission from person to person. And as long as that chain of transmission continues, unbroken, these traditions remain not relics of the past, but living, breathing parts of the present, proof that some forms of human knowledge are simply too valuable, too precise, and too deeply human to ever be replaced.